Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. So today I have the Airfix 176 scale Sherman Calliope tank. So this tank is essentially just a standard Sherman tank. The only thing is, you might be able to see the massive thing on top of the turret, which is actually a lot of rocket tubes. So in fact there are actually 60 rocket tubes on this Sherman, and they were pretty much used for taking out tanks, although they weren't that accurate, so they were used a lot for just taking out positions like buildings and things. So there were fairly small numbers used, and they were used by the Americans, and it was developed in 1943. And so one quite interesting thing about this is that the rockets swivel up and down with the gun, so if you see they're actually attached to the barrel, and so as you aim the gun up, the rockets would go up there as well. So it is just a standard M4 Sherman. So it's got the bogies here and the drive sprockets. So the Calliope was had 3 variants, I believe, and yeah, so it had 114mm rockets. So yeah, which is quite a lot. So another tank similar to this is the Matilda Hedgehog. I might do a video on it in the future, but the Matilda Hedgehog was essentially a regular Matilda Mark II, but it had, I believe, the naval Hedgehogs. I think the Hedgehogs were actually anti-submarine or anti-ship rockets, but they decided to throw them on the back of a Matilda. The only problem is they actually had to be aimed by moving the tank, whereas on this one you could stay stationary and just move it by the turret. I would say that this is probably one of my best Shermans, just because the weathering, although unfortunately I don't have any decals for it because they were lost. I built this model a while ago, and unfortunately then I didn't put the decals on because I didn't have the right stuff to do it, but now I do, and that's why my models look so much better. So one flaw about this tank is that many of you will know is the fact that the Sherman was just incredibly high. It's just such a tall tank compared to, say, the Churchill tank. So yeah, that was a problem with it. Also, it didn't have brilliant cross-country performance because you can see here there's not much. Basically, because this on the German tanks like the Panther, because of the large wheels, the overlapping suspension, it meant that it could go over quite rough terrain. But Shermans are known quite badly for getting bogged down really easily. But they were mass produced by the Americans and sent over by Lend-Lease, I think it was, yeah. And they were also named by the Germans Tommy Cookers because they had such a they were known for actually just setting alight from a shell, which isn't exactly brilliant. But yeah, they were mass produced and they were used pretty much everywhere. I think they were even used in the in Asia. I think, yeah, they were in the Pacific, and they were actually incredibly effective. They were the equivalent of what a Tiger is in Europe to the Japanese tanks, because the Japanese tanks were incredibly, well, I'd say weak compared to the Shermans. They were just they were completely outclassed because the guns were they weren't brilliant on the Japanese tanks, and the armour as well wasn't great. They were okay for what they were built for, but once the Shermans showed up, they really didn't have any chance. Although the Japanese tanks did fare well against the M3s. So yeah, sorry, the M2 Rhino. So yeah, one thing about this though is people do see the Sherman as I said earlier, the Tommy Cooker, and people say that it's a terrible tank for survivability. This is true in some ways, but also the hatches here and here for the driver and the co-driver. In fact, you can't see them, but there's only one hatch here, which you can barely see. And so basically, the driver and the co-driver, fairly easy to get out of. But on the turret, the loader and the gunner would actually have to. The loader would have to crawl under the gun breech to get out of the hatch, which wasn't a very good thing to do, say if the tank was on fire. There's so yeah, if you look, the hatches here at the front, they halfway through the Second World War, the Americans gave out this aftermarket, well, I call it aftermarket, but they gave out this kit that essentially it was a spring-loaded kit for the hatches, which meant that it was a lot easier to open these hatches. And if you actually look, I believe someone did a video on it on the internet, on YouTube. They did a test where they got out of a Sherman tank, and it's a lot easier to get out of than, say, a T-34, which wasn't built for survivability. These things, with the spring-loaded hatch on, were so much easier to get out of. And they were quite easy to get out of in some ways. So thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in another video.